Section 3. The Late Republic. Growth of territory and trade. After about 400 BC, the Roman Republic grew quickly, both geographically and economically. Within 200 years, the Roman army had conquered nearly all of Italy. Meanwhile, Roman traders had begun to ship goods back and forth around the Mediterranean Sea in search of new products and wealth. Growth of territory. Roman territory, mainly in response to outside threats. About 387 BC, a people called Gauls attacked Rome and took over the city. The Romans had to give the Gauls a huge amount of gold to leave the city. Inspired by the Gauls' victory, many of Rome's neighborhoods also decided to attack. With some difficulty, the Romans fought off these attacks. As Roman attackers were defeated, the Romans took over their lands. As you can see the map, the Romans soon controlled all the Italian peninsula except the far northern Italy. One reason of the Roman success was the organization of his army. Soldiers were organized in legions, or groups of up to 6,000 soldiers. Each legion was divided into centuries of groups of 100 soldiers. This organization allowed the army to be flexible. It could fight as a large group or several small ones. This flexibility allowed the Romans to defeat most enemies. Farming and trade. Before Rome conquered Italy, most Romans were farmers. As the Republic grew, many people left their farms for Rome. In place of these small farms, wealthy Romans built large farms in the countryside. These farms were worked by slaves who grew 1 or 2 crops. The owners of the farms didn't usually live on them. Instead, they stayed in Rome or other cities and let others run the farms for them. Rome's trade also expanded as the Republic grew. Rome's farmers couldn't grow enough food to support the city's increasing population, so merchants bought food from other parts of the Mediterranean. The merchants also bought metal goods and slaves to Rome. To pay for these goods, Romans had to make coins out of copper, silver, and other metals. Roman coins began to appear in markets all around the Mediterranean. Rome grows beyond Italy. As Rome's power grew, other countries came to see the Romans as a threat to their own power and declared war on them. In the end, Romans defeated their opponents. The Rome gained territories throughout the Mediterranean. The Punic Wars. The fiercest of the wars Rome fought were the Punic Wars, a series of wars against Carthage, a city in northern Africa. The word Punic means Phoenician in Latin. As you learned earlier in the book, the Phoenicians were an ancient civilization. They had built a city of Carthage. Rome and Carthage went to war 3 times, between 264 and 146. The wars began when Carthage sent its enemies to Sicily, an island just southwest of Italy. In response to the Romans also sent an army to our island. Before long, war broke out between them. Almost 200 years of fighting, the Romans forced their enemies out and took control of Sicily. In 218 BC, Carthage tried to attack Rome itself. An army led by the brilliant giant Hannibal set up for Rome. Although he forced the Romans right to the edge of defeat, Hannibal was never able to capture Rome itself. In the meantime, the Romans sent an army to attack Carthage. Hannibal rushed home to defend his city, but his troops was defeated at Zama in the battle illustrated below. By the 140s BC, many senators grown alarmed that Carthage was growing powerful again. They convinced Rome's consul to declare war on Carthage, and once again the Romans sent an army to Africa and destroyed Carthage. After this victory, the Romans burnt their city, killed most of its people, and sold the rest of the people into slavery. They also took control of northern Africa. Later expansion. During the Punic Wars, Rome took control of Sicily, Corsica, Spain, and North America. As a result, Rome controlled most of the western Mediterranean region. In the years followed, Roman legions marched north and east as well. In the 120s, Rome conquered the southern part of Gaul. By the time, Rome had also conquered Greece and parts of Asia. Hannibal. Many historians consider Hannibal to be one of the greatest generals of the ancient world. From an early age, he hated Rome. In 218 BC, he began the Second Punic War by attacking one of Rome's allies in Spain. After the war, he became the leader of Carthage, but later he was forced by the Romans to flee the city. He went to Asia and joined with the king fighting the Romans there. The king was defeated, and Hannibal killed himself so that he wouldn't become a Roman prisoner. Although the Romans took over Greece, they were greatly changed by the experience. We would normally expect the victor to change conquered country. Instead, the Romans adopted ideas about literature, art, philosophy, religion, and education from the Greeks. Crisis struck the Republic. As the Romans' territory grew, problems arose in the Republic. Rich citizens were getting richer, and many leaders feared that violence would erupt between rich and poor. Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. Among the first leaders to address Rome's problems was Gaius Gracchus. Both served as tribunes. Tiberius, who took office in 133 BC, wanted to create farms for poor Romans. The purpose of these farms was to keep the poor citizens happy and prevent rebellions. Tiberius wanted to create his farms on public land that wealthy citizens had illegally taken over. The public supported this idea, but the wealthy citizens opposed it. Conflict over the idea led to riots in the city, during which Tiberius was killed. A few years later, Gaius also tried to create new farms. He also began to sell food cheaply to Rome's poor citizens. Like his brother, Gaius, angered with powerful Romans and was killed for his ideas. The violent deaths of Gracchus' brothers changed Roman politics. From that time on, people saw violence as a political weapon. They often attacked leaders with whom they disagreed. Marius and Sulla. In the late 100s BC, another social change nearly led to the end of the Republic. In 107 BC, the Roman army desperately needed more troops. In response, a consul named Gaius Marius encouraged poor people to join the army. Before, only people who owned property had been allowed to join. As a result of this change, thousands of poor and unemployed citizens joined Rome's army. Because Marius was a good general, his troops were more loyal than they were to Rome. The army's support gave Marius great political power. Following his example, other ambitious politicians also sought of their army's support. Lucius Colonius Sulla became consul in 88 BC. Sulla soon came into conflict with Marius, a conflict that led to a civil war in Rome. A civil war is a war between citizens of the same country. In the end, Sulla defeated Marius. He later named himself dictator and used his powers to punish his enemies. Spartacus. No longer after Sulla died, another crisis arose to challenge Rome's leaders. Thousands of slaves led by former gladiator Spartacus rose up and demanded freedom. Spartacus and his followers defeated an army sent to stop them and took over much of southern Italy. Eventually, Spartacus was killed in battle. Without his leadership, the revolt fell apart. Victorious, the Romans executed 6,000 rebellion slaves as an example to others who thought about rebelling. The rebellion was over, but the Republic's problems were